Hey everyone, I'm Mac Ruff. I'm the creator of the Next-Rails CLI open source application. It's kind of like the Ruby on Rails CLI, but for Next.js. And it is not a new framework. It is Next.js. It uses create next app behind the scenes. And I'm going to show you a little bit what it is and how you use it. So this is like the README page for Next-Rails. You can use npx or you can install it globally. I'm going to use npx. Next-Rails, and we're going to make a new project. And today, our project is going to be called To-Dos. And what this is going to do is this is calling create next app behind the scenes with a bunch of default configurations. And then it's going to apply more packages. It's going to apply ESLint. It's going to apply Tailwind. It's going to make sure shadcn is completely compatible. It's going to install connects, which we're going to use for migrations and seeds. It's going to copy over Docker files for running Postgres locally because this is all Postgres based right now. In the future, maybe I'll allow more databases, but right now it's all focused just on Postgres because that's what I use. It's got Prettier. Future, I'm going to be adding Husky, lint stage, that type of stuff, but not yet. Most of these commands I got straight from the Rails CLI. So Rails new creates a new Rails app. Rails generate, you can generate a model. Most of the time, these commands are going to be running scaffold. The idea of scaffold is it creates a whole bunch of files for you. So we have our application. Took a minute. We got to-dos. So we're going to cd into to-dos. I'll do that right here. The first thing I like to do is we can get it up and running with Docker. I already have Docker running. You run Docker Compose up. It's going to get Postgres running, and it's going to get Next.js running. That's going to run in the background. Once that's up and running, we'll be able to see the site. It's not going to have much to it just yet, but once we scaffold things, you'll start seeing a lot of things really quickly show up. All right, looks like it's up and running. Go to Firefox. All right, welcome to Next.js initialized by Next-Rails. This does not look like the original Next.js screen, but behind the scenes, this is all Next.js. This is like the default Next.js page. This is a link to the npm package, and it's saying, hey, why don't you try scaffolding a new model? So let's do that. It's npx rails generate scaffold user. You can give it like a name and email. So let's go to the console. And here I'm going to say npx next rails, and you can do G instead of generate for short, just like in the Rails CLI. User, I'll say name is a string, email is a string, and hit enter. And now it's going to generate a bunch of files. It's making a model file, it's making a migration, it's making a whole bunch of pages in Next.js, and it's making a whole bunch of API routes. And this is using the pages directory. It's not using the new app router. This really only works as a system with these predictable routing, predictable imports aliasing. So the app router isn't quite ready for this yet. So we just made a bunch of pages. If we were to open our to-dos here, you can see everything that's changed. And actually, let's do a get status. This is everything that's different from standard Next.js. So we added an ESLint. We updated the README. It's the same as the next README, but I added all the Next CLI commands to the end of it, so you don't have to look in my package again. Updated those packages. We added more dependencies. We added Tailwind. This is the Tailwind and global CSS that shadcn uses, so this is like remaining compatibility there. Source lib was also for shadcn. We open up. We have DB. We have migrations. I'm going to open this up and make it a little bigger for y'all. Too big. All right. This is the type of migration that's created automatically. It's creating the extension if it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist for UUID. I like to use UUID. So my default is I always use the UUID extension and default to making a new UUID rather than doing an auto-incrementing integer. I find it's better for a little bit of security so people can't just guess what someone else's ID is. It gives you that extra level of safety. Now, it doesn't make you perfectly safe, but that's my preference. We have our name here. We have our email. Defaults to not nullable. In the future, I might add some more configurations so you can choose, but I'm going to base that off of the Rails CLI. But for now, this is great. Gives me a default created at, updated at, and ID. That's true for all models with Next-Rails. Take a look at models. So it's generated some TypeScript interfaces for us. We have our user, we have our user metadata type, and then we have our user metadata. So this tells us what all these have IDs, they all have created at, updated at, and then they have different input types. Now these are used for generating the pages. So if we go to user, I'm just going to show you what the page looks like. Although I think we need to run the migration first. Let's do that. So first thing, after you run scaffold, it tells you to run Next-Rails db migrate. And that's using Connect's migrations behind the scenes. It ran it, great. And then it's updating our schema JSON. You don't really need to look at schema JSON, but it's just a copy of the pattern of your schema, and we use that to generate some pages. If we go back to Firefox, this is what it looked like before. If I refresh it, you'll now see that users has been added. There's a whole page for users. You can come in here and see what the schema looks like. You can click on here, or you can go in the nav bar. And here's users. We don't have a user yet, but we can add one. Let's go Matt and say Matt's email at gmail.com. Create a user. And look, now I have a user. Great. And I can come in here. I can destroy this user. I can edit this user. I'll go back to user. Let's edit it. Let's say I want to change it to my actual email. Bam, there you go. And let's say, never mind. I actually want to delete this user. User deleted successfully. And it's gone. So I have to remake myself. But great, now I have user. I'm going to copy this. I might need this later. We can go home. Let's add more. This is where scaffolding is really fun. Now we can start adding more types. npx Next-Rails g, or generate, scaffold, to do. And we're just going to have, why is it always so hard? Let's have, we'll call it text. And that's going to be a string. And you know what, this is a realistic thing, is you'll generate something and you'll be like, oh, crud, I actually meant to do something else. So we can do the same thing. We can add more to it, and we'll just have to go and delete the old migration. It has not run yet. So npx Next-Rails generate scaffold to do text, and it's going to reference user. So we're just going to go ahead and delete the first one that it made. But if we look at this migration, what's different from the other one is this has a new UID that it makes a foreign key, and it says references in user table. So this is actually creating that foreign key relationship and the constraint in Postgres for us. So now that we've run that migration and we have some pages, or we've created the migration, now we need to run it. Next-Rails db migrate. It's going to run that. Bam. All right. Go back to Firefox or refresh. And now we have to-dos. If we try to make it to-do, we notice we don't have a user ID. This is why I copied it earlier. Make YouTube video. And now we have our to-do. And it's related to the exact user. So behind the scenes in Postgres, there's two new tables, one's referring to the other, and that's all it really took to make. So this is a lot of the benefit of Rails, is being able to scaffold out and make these relationships and quickly make these like CRUD pages. This handles all that for you. A lot of the API is either done through Connects for server-side rendering. So I'll show you one of these pages here. Pages user. If we go to the show page, this is all code generated by Next-Rails CLI when you run scaffold. It may not look like your normal code if you were just using Next.js, because it has to be able to dynamically accept any type. So like a string, body of text, like a text area has to support numbers, checkboxes, all those things for different types of booleans. We also support the vector for embedding. It uses pgvector. So maybe it's not your traditional code, but it's just a starting point. And that's the same idea with Rails too. It gets you somewhere to start. So here we have a get server-side props that loads based off the ID. If you look in the URL, If we go to to-dos, you'll see, yep, the index there. If you go to edit, see it goes to the edit page. And let's open up the pages API to-dos. There's a whole bunch here. We have index, which is not really being used right now because the index page is using server-side rendering. But if you wanted to get a list of all of the to-dos in your app from anywhere in your app, you can hit this index method. If you want to just get that singular one, same thing. This one's probably not being used right now because it's server-side rendering, but you could use this to get a to-do on another page if you wanted to. Destroy is something that we'll have access to as well. A lot of this is just CRUD access, so delete where ID equals this. It puts all this scaffolded code out for you so you can very quickly develop and start iterating. And that's kind of the idea. Let's go back home. This is the package. I'm going to link it in the description. We have package Next-Rails. And check out my dev blog. I blogged a little bit about this. I post about AI and software development, a lot of Next.js, a lot of Rails-like things. And thanks for listening.